Hi guys, welcome back. And in today's video, we'll be discussing about the hospital space. I'll be talking about four hospitals, namely that is Global Health, Medanta, Jupiter Lifeline Hospital, and we're going to be talking about Rainbow Children's. I will also do a P2P. We are also going to be discussing about Yatharth, and we'll be doing a P2P of all these four hospitals. I will not be discussing Yatharth in detail because I've already covered the result and con call in one video. In I think in a separate video, so you can watch that. So this could be like the part one of the hospital space, and probably I'll get another part two where I discuss the likes of Fortis and Max Healthcare, right? So let us start today. So the first hospital we'll be discussing is Jupiter Lifeline. So if you look at Jupiter Lifeline, the entire the entire structure, I mean, one thing that is very common among whether it is Jupiter, whether it is Global Health, whether it is Yatharth, and there's another hospital called GPT Healthcare. I like to club all of this while I'm doing an analysis, because if you look at them, they all are kind of a regional hospital, right? Because if you look at Jupiter, it is very concentrated in Maharashtra, right? They have first of all, they have three primary hospitals in Thane, in Pune, and in Indore, and they're coming up with another two hospitals in Dombivli and another one in Pune, which are of a 500-bed hospitals, right? And if you look at over here, if you look at their IPO, whatever they've told, they've been executing it, every time. And the only problem I think with this hospital, in one way, if I had to tell you, I think the way it got listed, the valuation it got listed only was a bit expensive. As much as I remember, I think it got listed at around 65, 70 kind of PE. So that is the only a bit negative, I would say. But other than that, if you look at it, the growth rate, whatever they told, they've been maintaining it, they've been maintaining the expansion. Just to give you an idea of about, what their Q1 FY25 numbers have been. If you look at the sales growth, the sales has grown at 18%. You can see a little bit the pace of growth has come up, because usually you see them like in the month of, like, usually in other quarters you see they're a good 15% growth engine, so a little bit basis points have increased, but still great, right? So the sales growth has been 18%. Now if you look at the pat, if you look, there's a bit of a I wouldn't say confusion, but I think there's this one time off in pat. So that is why you will see, like, the pat, I think in last year they had more, I think they had some tax which was deferred, so because of that the pat growth is lesser. But if you look at the PBT growth, the profit before tax, I think that would be the right parameter for here, at least for Jupiter Lifeline. The PBT that is there has grown by 78%. Okay. And so I think if you take that one time tax also, their PAT would have grown, right? One time the tax benefit that they had. Okay. If you look at the occupancy has increased by 11% on a year on year basis. That is, if you take this Q1 versus last Q1, and the occupancy right now on a consolidated basis, it stands at 63.9. Even if you look at RPOB also has increased. RPOB has increased by 6.9%, and RPOB stands right now at 59,700. ALS is all good. If you look at their capex also, I think they had around 1,200 beds during the time, and I would believe it is during Q4, or during the time they came for IPO, it was 1,200 beds. And after that, they told they want to double the bed capacity, right? Or at least almost double the bed capacity. And they have this vision of taking from this 1,200 to 2,200 beds by FY27 or during FY27. And they're already doing it with two expansions. One is with that Dombivli hospital, like I told you, and the other one is with the new Pune hospital, which are both 500 bedded hospital. Now, if you look at Dombivli hospital, this is supposed to be done, or at least the phase one, where they will be launching 250 to 300 beds by Q4 of this year. And New Pune hospital, there is no exact timeline as to like when it will be done, because if you look, one thing that's very common among I think Jupiter Lifeline is they usually buy the land and they construct the hospital from scratch, right? And New Pune Hospital, I think they still with the land negotiation has happened, but the groundwork is still yet to be laid. Other than that, if you see with the existing hospitals that is there in Thane, Pune, and Indore, they're doing some brownfield capex where they're increasing a little bit of bed capacity, right? If you look at their the Pune hospital, they wanted to add around 22 beds. I think in last con call that they told they will be adding 22 beds, and there they have completed adding the 22 beds in this quarter. They've completely done it. Other than that, in the indoor hospital that they had, which is already there they wanted to add two new floors in the indoor hospital. For that also, they've taken the permission, and they wanted to add around 75 beds and take the total capacity over here to 300. And I think this capex was going to be going to cost them around, I think, 15 to 20 crores. In that range it was supposed to be there. But all in all, great. All the expansion plan, like I told you, is going well. Everything is on track, at least for this hospital. Only thing we are supposed to wait and watch is, how this Dombivli hospital will play out, and also how this new Pune hospital, when it will be done. And hopefully we get a date as to, like, when it will be up and running, or when the operations can come in. So that's that, the entire, you can tell, the comprehension of what happened in the con call, and the result of Jupiter Lifeline. There is no price hike over here that Jupiter has taken, because only in Q4 only they got a price hike from both the insurance, and they also took, I believe, 5% price hike for the cash segment, right? So overall, good. Only thing here is, if you look, their RPOB is also quite higher, right? Like around 60,000 odd rupees. Now here, if you look, the RPOB is higher. One of the reason is because the RPOB is 59,700 to be specific. The RPOB is higher because if you see, majority comes from cash and insurance, like 48%, like 48 percentage from cash, 48, another 48 percentage coming from insurance space, roughly, you can tell. And I think the government segment is hardly few, like 1 to 3 percentage in that. So they do not take a lot of those ECHS, CGHS kind of thing, and that is why you will see the RPOB is much on the higher end over here, right? So overall, good. Everything is great. I will do the P2P over here, and I will show you the valuation part also. I think then it would make sense. But right now, the first few minutes, let us just discuss, what has been happening about the business, and what's the update like, right? So that's that on the end of Jupiter Lifeline Hospital. Now, if you talk about Rainbow also over here, I think if you all have been tracking Rainbow, Rainbow was a good 20% odd growth engine, right? There has been times when it has grown even north of 20% also, and we saw for the entirety. Yeah, one second. Yeah, and we saw for the entirety of last year, they had a lot of problems. I think it started from last Q1 itself. First was the monsoon season weren't that great, followed by, there was a lot of higher base from COVID, and a lot of things. And you would see always that their RPOB only was higher, because RPOB generally is higher for these kind of hospitals, and they got it because of the hike from the insurance space and the cash segment. They were taking hike. So you would always see that whatever the single digit growth you got for Rainbow was only because of the increase in RPOP, not necessarily because of increase in occupancy. And they were really struggling for a very long period of time, you can tell. But finally, I think a little bit, tides are better. It has been a bit, I think it is at least better than compared to what it did, at least the last few quarters. Because if you look at the sales growth for Rainbow Children's Medicare, the sales growth has been 15%, right? And I don't think also it's fair to compare Rainbow to the other three hospitals, because Rainbow is a purely children's hospital, right? It's more focused on pediatric and providing very specialized pediatric care, and maternal care. So, but having said that, anyways, coming back to the topic, the sales growth over here has been 15 percentage. And if you look at the PAT hasn't really grown. In fact, it's degrown. So PAT is down by 4.2% on a year-on-year basis. Okay, not try to compare on a QOQ basis, because for hospital segment, if you see, Q4 is generally weak, right? So it doesn't make sense to compare Q4 with Q1. Now, talking about occupancy over here, occupancy hardly increased by 4%, like not much over here. And if you look at the occupancy also, it stands at 42 percentage versus 40 percentage last time. RPOB ka bhi agar aap dekhte ho, RPOB is down by 6 percentage. Like I told you, if you look at their entire treatment, most of the revenue comes from, when you talk about your RPOB is a function of two things. One, you either do a high specialized kind of treatments, where generally the treatment cost is higher, which is not for, because if you look at their pediatric care, where all this pediatric neurosurgeon and everything, it is a very small portion of their revenue, right? And majority portion of the revenue comes from the general health only. So here, and the other reason for RPOB for you to grow will be your mix, payer mix, and your, how you get hike on that. And since they already got a hike in the last few quarters, they haven't got any hike this time. So RPOB has fallen by 6% this time. So not much a good, you can't, it's not really a great set of numbers, I would tell. But having said that, it is at least a bit better than what it used to do earlier, right? And ALOS is under control only. The average length of stay at 2.76. If you look at this hospital, if you look at Rainbow, one thing is, of course, their growth rate has been a bit stalled if you compare it, right? Like they were growing at 20%. So, of course, you can tell that the pace of growth has come down. Other than that, other than the growth factor going down, if you look at all their capex, because they have a lot of capex going on, right, in plan, They want to open a hospital in Gurugram. They are opening a hospital in Coimbatore, in Hyderabad, in Bangalore also. All of the capex that they have in plan is, again, like I told you, is on track. They're opening new hospitals and everything. So one thing that's very common with all these hospital, everybody is doing capex and all their capexes are on track. But the major differentiator comes is in terms of growth rate, because there are certain hospitals that are growing and doing capex, right? And there are some hospitals where the growth rate is not that the capex is happening, and you have to focus on कि like अरे आगे जाके growth आएगा. So that is something that where I do not really, like, prefer those kind of companies. I would like to have companies where you have growth and at the same time you do capex. So that's it about Rainbow. Again, like I told you, nothing much interesting, because the kind of valuation it is at right now, and 15% growth at, I mean, at that valuation, if you're kind of doing 15% growth, it doesn't really make sense, because it becomes very hard. At the problem is when you have a very high valuation and then you come with, either a single digit growth or something like 15% kind of growth, it becomes hard to justify that P, because it becomes very difficult to get P rating from there onwards. So that is a problem over here with this stock or with this business, you can tell. The next hospital that we'll be discussing is Global Health. I think it's listed in the name of Medanta. And if you look at this hospital, they have hospitals in a lot of regions, but mainly in the Hindi heartland only. It started from Gurgaon. They have hospital in Gurgaon, in Lucknow, Patna, Indore, Ranchi, and Noida. Right. So again, they have hospital in 6 locations. Not just that, and right now, if you see, they have around 2,890 beds. I'm talking about the combined. If you look at all the hospitals, they have 2,890 beds. And here they plan to take from this 2,890 beds to around 5,000 5,173 beds. Okay. And not really sure in what timeline they will take this hospital, because there are a few things that are happening over here in this hospital. I'll just give you the capex plan first before running to the growth rate. Because with the existing hospital, like I told you, whether it is Gurugram, Noida, Patna, and all, they're adding incremental beds. Okay. So if you look in Gurugram in Q1 FY25, that is in this quarter, they added 49 beds, which also included some ICU beds. If you look at Lucknow, they're adding around 98 beds. Okay. And out of that 98 beds, 47 beds will be added in this year. Okay. That is there. In Patna also, they're adding few beds. And it is going to be a combination of chemotherapy beds and dialysis beds, right? So that is also happening over there. If you look at Noida, that current another hospital that they're coming up with, this year they're planning to open a hospital in Noida. So like I told you, with the existing hospitals, they're planning to do add incremental beds, and they have 3 new hospitals coming up. Okay. One is in Noida, where they're trying to add 550 beds. And I think out of this, 300 beds will be operational by Q4 of this year or Q1 of next year. That is one. And in Delhi, in the south of Delhi, I think they're having a partnership with DLF. I think you all know that DLF, na, the real estate partner. So it is going to be a 50-50 equity, like 50% equity will be with this hospital and 50 with DLF. And there they're planning to open a hospital, a 400 bedded hospital they're planning to open over there. Along with that, another hospital they're trying to open at Indore, again a 300 bedded hospital with a real estate, again it's going to be a partnership with another real estate firm. And recently in this Q1 FY25, they have acquired a land with a potential to build around 500, at least 500 beds. 500, it can go more than that, in Bombay. Okay. So 4 new hospitals coming up, and incremental bed capacity in the existing hospital. And that is how they plan to take from the existing around 2,800 890 beds to around 5,173 beds. Now, if the only thing is, you do not know in what year this 5,173 beds will be done, because like I told you, there are 2 to 3 new hospitals that are coming up, right? Like if you look at that, the partnership with DLF, then they have another partnership with that in Indore with another real estate partner, and the one in Bombay. Since here they're acquiring the land and they're setting up things, a lot of groundwork is going on. There is no definitive period as to, like, when all of these hospitals will commence operation and will start running, because it's they're doing everything from scratch over here. So here it's only becomes it's a bit difficult to estimate as to, like, by what year you're expecting a doubling of bed capacity. Now, having said that, if you look at the other than the all these capex, if you look, the growth rate over here has been a bit has been a bit disappointing, because again, like I told you, global health, once they came to IPO, after IPO they were growing at a very north of 20% only. And I think the stock also doubled or tripled from that levels, right? They were they were consistently also growing at 2025. Margins were also improving, but now you see the growth rate has stalled, right? And it's been a couple of quarters now. I think this is the second quarter where the growth rate has come down. Global health, if you see, the sales is at 10.6 percentage. If you look at the PAT is flat almost. You can tell the PAT has just grown by 2.95 percentage, right? And occupancy का अगर आप बात करते हो, occupancy has increased by 7 percentage and it is at 59 percentage, and ARPOB भी hardly 8% से increase हुआ है, ठीक है? So here the one of the problem why we are seeing a bit of mediocrity in terms of growth is because one of their hospitals, like I told you, उनका लखनऊ में एक hospital है, वहां पर little bit they're facing a problem to increase occupancy, to provide to grow that hospital. And I think this is the second quarter, because last quarter they told Q3 may Q3 Q4 it was like Q4 is anyways weak, a lot of in Q3 everything is getting delayed because of festivals, a lot of treatments get delayed. So that was the reason given, but we are seeing it continue happen to Q1, and that is why you see, that is why I told you a bit of mediocre. So that is one thing. So overall, those are the three hospitals. Now what I will quickly do is I will just do a P2P. I'll just share my screen and I will do a, one second, let me just share my screen. I will do a quick um yeah, with Yatharth, I will not compare it, because, yeah, I mean, with Yatharth, I'll compare it, but I won't talk about Yatharth because I've already done it in one of my earlier videos. So you can see over here, I'll just explain the columns. Of course, here are all the hospitals. We have the sales growth percentage on a year-on-year basis. We have the PAT growth percentage on a year-on-year basis. The occupancy, what has been the increase of occupancy of Q1 FY24 versus FY25 in terms of percentage. And this is the occupancy in absolute of consolidated basis of Q1 FY25 versus Q1 FY24. Similarly with RPOB and RPOB ka increase in percentage, and here you can see the Q1 FY25 versus FY24, ALOS and the capex, and we also discussed the valuation part. Okay, I've covered all these part like I mentioned earlier. One thing over here, you can probably like just pause the screen and look at the different occupancy and RPOB parameter. I would just like to highlight over here one thing. Occupancy, of course, it is very much crucial, because occupancy is like a volume growth for the hospital. You have to fill your beds and increase it. But if you look at RPOB is value growth, and like I told you, RPOB over here is a function of two things. One, you do a specialized case mix, and as you go more and more into case mix, right? Like a different case mix. Can we keep this? Uh, mhm. Yeah, I think this would be better. So, like I told you, over here, occupancy we need to increase, right? Because it's like a volume parameter. But RPOB, if you look at it, it is a function of two things. If you increase a more of a specialized case mix, if you start providing more like, more of cancer treatments, more of, specialized operations, if you do, your RPOB is bound to increase. That is one thing. And the second thing is payer mix. So if you look over here, if you look at all these hospitals like Jupiter, Rainbow, and Global Health, one thing that is very common among all these hospitals is the government contribution that comes is very less. With Jupiter, I think it's hardly 1 to 2%. With Global Health, I think it ranges between 4 to 7%. Rainbow Children absolutely has no government contribution. It's equal, like 50% cash and 50% insurance. Only with Yatharth, if you see, Yatharth has around the highest coming from the government contribution. I think it is around 35 to 37% coming from the government contribution, and then the rest is equally split between cash and insurance. I think it ranges from 35 to 40, can change every quarter by a few percentage points. Now the reason why Yatharth is the highest government contribution is because if you look at the vicinity where the Yatharth hospitals are located, whether it is in Noida, all the three hospitals that are there, or in the Jhansi, they are among that the quarters where all these government employees stay. As you know, if you work for the government, like if you're working in the railway department, if you're working in that CBIs or other departments, you are provided with a housing and you all stay in a particular colony. So as a result, because they stay in a particular in that location, and people from that category come and claim that ECHs and CGHs, all that different kind of policies, is the reason why Yatharth ka government contribution is higher. It is not necessarily that because they have reserved a certain kind of bed for the government treatments. That is not the case, because they are a private hospital and they have not received any kind of help in opening the hospital. But this is the thing. So that is why you see that the ARPOB is relatively lower compared to the other hospital. It has got nothing to do with a specialized case mix, because Yatharth ka 70%, I think 70 to 75% of the revenue comes from specialized case mix versus general medicine. Okay, so that's that. Over ARPOB, you can see one thing over here. You will see that Yatharth has the highest. If you look, let's first talk about the sales growth. One thing you will see among the sales growth also, this is Q1 FY25 versus FY24, Q1 FY24. You see that over all the four, you will see Yatharth has the highest sales growth. Similarly, in terms of PAT also, you see the highest amount of PAT growth, where you can also see that the operating leverage is visible over here for Yatharth compared to anybody else. In terms of occupancy over here, by the way, you can see occupancy terms, Jupiter and Yatharth have the same increase in occupancy compared to the other people. In terms of RPOB, again, in spite of having a higher portion mix coming from the government, you see the increase in RPOB is more over here. And this just shows that, these people are doing a lot of specialized case mix, because here these people don't have a chance of winning RPOB due to change in case mix, right? Like government, because the government is coming more, their revenue is coming more, you have to do much better in terms of your product. And that is why even the RPOB also, you see that Yatharth has the highest among all the peers, right? Now, talking about ALOS, you will see here, ALOS, you would want it to be on the lower end, but you will see here, Yatharth ka ALOS is a bit higher. Is because they've recently started with this cancer treatments. They've started with a lot of, transplants, where of course your length of stay is a bit more compared to your other treatments or other chronic illness that you do. The last and the most important thing where we have to do is capex, right? Because like I told you, you need a company where there is both the growth as well as where they're increasing the bed capacity. Because the problem with hospital is you have a certain amount of bed and you can only cater to yeah, you have a certain amount of bed and you can only cater a certain amount of people. The maximum revenue you can earn. So further, if you want to scale it up and you want further growth, you need to open new hospitals also. So with Jupiter, you will see they want to go from 1200 beds to 2200 beds in a span of 3 to 5 years. Actually, this is 1200 beds, I think, during the time they came from for IPO. So they're planning to almost double the bed capacity in a span of 5 years. This 1200 was during the time they came for IPO. When you talk about Rainbow also, Rainbow has around 1935 beds. That is as of Q1 FY25, and they plan to increase it, to 2625 by FY26, FY27. Similarly, with Global Health, Medanta, as of now, like I told you, they have 2,890 beds. It's not 2,725. It's 2,890 as of Q1 FY25, and they want to take it to 4,000 bed at least in 2 years, right? This doesn't include the recent partnership that they have done, that is the Bombay Hospital and the DLF. With they're merging with DLF, because those are the two hospitals where they have the plans to open, but there is no specific date, like I told you. And versus over here, whereas Yatharth plans to double the bed capacity in a span of 3 to 3.5 years, from 1,400 to 3,000 beds by FY28. So over here also, you can see in terms of not just they have the highest growth rate, but also they plan to double the bed capacity in a span of a shorter duration compared to their peers also. That is one thing. And another thing over here, compared to other hospitals, you see that most of the hospitals are going for a greenfield capex. Whereas Yatharth, they plan to double the bed capacity by acquiring an already existing hospital. Now, the advantage of acquiring an already existing hospital is there are two reasons. See, one thing is, if you go for a greenfield, there is a long period, right? You have to construct the hospital, you have to get permissions, and you understand with hospital, once you construct it, you don't get like immediate result, right? Because even if you have to reach an occupancy of 40 percentage, it takes around 2 to 3 years. Because when you talk about hospital is a matter of trust, right? Think about it. Whenever you've gone for a treatment, you either gone to that doctor where probably one of your relatives or friends has gone, or you go through a millions of reviews to go to that doctor. So similarly, and that because of the trust factor, the regionalized, localized things, and all of the other factors, it becomes very difficult for a hospital to reach that kind of occupancy. Now imagine these hospitals, they take 2 to 3 years to get the hospital up and running, and another 2 to 3 years to just have an occupancy of 40 percentage. It will take a year or two for you to just break even on an EBITDA level, depending on the scale of the hospital. So literally, it would take probably around 5 to 6 years just to from the time you start construction, to the entire to see profitable. It can take even up to 6 to 10 years. That's how it is. But when you're acquiring a hospital, the advantage you have, it already is there in the locality. People know about it. All you have to do is go and change the management and put your people over there. Of course, it's not easy as I sit here and talk, but relatively it is much better than greenfield capex that we do, in terms of from an investor point of view, because you don't face a lot of at least EBITDA margin losses compared to the greenfield, right? Of course, it can, you do face to a certain extent, but at least relatively lower, right? Because you have a certain things already up and running. Sometimes you can have empanelment also for your hospitals, for the previous hospitals. It makes it better. So that is one advantage that Yatharth has, because one of the things I think in their expansion phase that they have is recently they acquired that Asian Fidelis Hospital in Faridabad, and going forward they told that they will acquire one hospital every year. So that makes it a bit better, because like the Asian Fidelis Hospital, I think in just 1 month of operation is having a double digit occupancy, because that hospital already had all the empanelments with all the insurance companies, and all that ECHS, CGHS and all, making it better. So like I told you, in terms of growth rate, in terms of ARPOB, in terms of occupancy also, every parameter you see, one thing over here is Yatharth is hitting the spot. Similarly, Jupiter also is one such hospital which is hitting all the spots over here. But the only problem, or the only, I wouldn't say problem, but in comparison, if you have to check relatively, it is a bit of a slow growth compared to Yatharth. That is the only problem. Otherwise, I would rate Yatharth first, followed by Jupiter. Now, the last thing I would talk is about the valuation, right? Because if you look at it, again, like I told you, Yatharth has the highest growth in this space. It is doing all the things right, and it is at the lowest valuation. Now, for all these hospitals, as much as I'm right, yeah. Yeah, I have taken, I think, probably around 20 to 30% ka PAT growth over FY24, and I've calculated the 1 year forward PE. So I think if I do so, it will be yeah. So for Jupiter, what I've done is it's like a 40 crore a quarter. So if you look at it, it is going to be, if you look by the end of the year, not considering the seasonality, they would be able to do around 160 to 200 crore PAT for FY25, and you divide it by the market cap of the company, and you get these valuations. So if you look over here, you can see that, right, 20, the valuations for Jupiter is quite higher for an 18% growth versus compared to Yatharth. That is at literally, like, I think it is growing 37%. So literally, I think if I have to calculate PEG also, it would be less than 1.5. So over here, one thing that you can clearly see, that Yatharth really wins all the point in terms of high growth, highest growing in all the parameters, and the lowest of the valuation. Jupiter would have been a bit better to have it if only if the valuation was a bit low, because at this rate, when your 1 year forward PE is only at around 45 to 55, and it's still just an 18% growth rate engine, then the PE rating becomes very hard. Now, when I tell PE rating is, now you would see sometimes, right, like, the stocks really run, right? Because it's a very good combination when you have high growth and low engine. Your stocks literally double in a few quarters. But when you have this, the pace of growth is very low. It becomes quite hard for PE rating to go up. Like, because most of the growth will come from EPS expansion only. And it's actually the problem with Jupiter, like I told you, they got listed only at a very high valuation. I still remember during the time of listing, it was around 15% ka growth engine, and they got listed at around 60 to 70 P, in that range they got listed. So that's that. Other than that, if you see, like I told you, global health, again, a 10% ka growth engine at 47 to 52, making everything the very least desirable. Rainbow Children, I think, is the least desirable out of all, because the 1 year forward P comes up to 67 to 85, considering it is only a 15% ka growth engine, and the PAT is also, the PAT is degrowing. So that is that. So that's that about the entire hospital space. I wouldn't go in depth and discuss about the likes of, as much as I would like to, because there is shortage of time with Apollo and Narayan Hrudayalaya, because those are the companies. One is, if you look at Apollo, it's a very large cap, and the growth rate is hardly between 12 to 15%, and it becomes very hard for a company like Apollo to grow, because the scale is, because the size of the business is so big. And that is why you see them doing, all this pharmacy business. They're going into starting clinics and franchising clinics out, because they understand that is the best way for them to grow. Similarly with, I think, whether it is Fortis, I think 12% ka hai. Narayan Hrudayalaya is 7%, and they're venturing right now to insurance business. And I think they have planned to open hospitals in Bangalore and Calcutta. Again, I think it will take them 3 to 5 years to open a hospital over here. Very uninteresting option right now. I think the only best player over here would be Max, in terms of like mid cap, large cap. I think Max, I think it's at 70,000 crore market cap, and yet growing at 19 to 20%, and doing like a huge expansion. I think they have plans to double the bed capacity in the next 3 years. I'm just amazed at what they're doing at that scale. That's at least, I think, one hospital I would be interested to study. I'll probably cover that in another video, because there's a lot to discuss in terms of Max, in terms of the expansion that they're doing, because they're doing so many expansions, and they're doing so many QIPs every time. So that's there. But I would say these are at least the places, because the market cap is quite lower for all of these companies, right? I think they're below 10,000 crore market cap, except for, of course, Rainbow and Global Health Medanta. It makes it, like, give a shot, other than the likes of Apollo, Fortis, Narayan Hrudayalaya, and everything. There's another company called GPT Healthcare, which is also a regional hospital based out of Calcutta. But again, quite uninteresting, because they are having, like, the growth rate is flat. I think they hardly, this Q1 over Q1, the growth rate was hardly 1 or 2%. So I didn't want to waste our time on that. So that's that. But overall, the entire hospital space, if you see, Yatharth is like a cheetah, followed by Jupiter. And I would also add Max to the list, considering they also have a really good growth rate and expansion going on at the same time. So that's that about the entire hospital space. I'll see you again in another video. And until then, take care. Bye.